So you said in the manifestation meditations, you came forth eagerly to this physical manifestation.
Speaking of all of you?
You were speaking of all of us, yes. There's part of me that believes that, but then there's part of me that's that feels like I derailed almost immediately on arrival. And I've had this conflict for almost 45 years of I don't really want to be here. I really love to be here, but I don't really want to be here. And I have this conflict.
Well, we would put it in different words. I want all of me to be here. I want all of me to be here. It's not that you don't want to be here. It's you don't want to partially be here. You don't want to be here in diminished form. You don't want to be here as a less manifested version of who you are. You want all of you to be here.
Yes.
Because it's only in those down times that you think that. When you're rocking and rolling, when you're flowing, when you're feeling good, then there's no place that you would rather be. And that's why we speak of that eagerness. We think of these seminars, we've been calling them Art of Allowing. Perhaps we should begin calling them Eagerness Restoration Seminars. Because you came with eagerness because there was nothing that was muting it. You hadn't picked up things along your physical trail that you were using as vibrational reasons to disallow the fullness. Watch little kids and see their eagerness. There was a child at the airport who discovered the moving walkway and managed to get on it without his mother noticing. And so she's walking on normal ground while he's walking on the moving walkway, and she can't begin to keep up with him. And it's such a metaphor for life in general. In other words, parents can't vibrationally have a hard time keeping up with these noodled ones that are coming. And so in order to level the playing field, most parents and teachers and establishments set out to mute the eagerness as quickly as possible so that they can relate to their children. And we do everything we can to restore that eagerness at whatever stage of your life you're willing to begin to listen. So give us more about that.
I said I was derailed, but I feel like I continued to derail myself. I have eagerness and then beauty and music and these things in my life, but then there's part of me that wants to derail that.
Those are interesting words, and we get the concept of it, but can you give us an example of when you feel the derailment process begin? Or do you only notice once the train has really left the track? Doesn't matter, because you can get the train back on the track. But what kind of things derail you?
Well, not having work, which is where I'm at right now, that's pretty constantly in my mind.
When you had work, how was it?
It was nice to get a paycheck.
We get that, but how was work?
Mostly it was pretty good, but became not so good, so I left.
So it was sort of like you eagerly came into physical experience, and then it derailed, and you eagerly began that work, and then it derailed. So talk to us about what causes the diminishment of your enthusiasm for that work. You got it figured out. They weren't asking enough. There wasn't enough opportunity for growth. What you wanted to say wasn't heard by enough people. There was too much for me to do. I didn't want to supervise children any longer. It became a burden to me, that particular work. You didn't want to supervise children.
I was supervising children. I was teaching.
So you didn't want to be part of the derailment of children process. You didn't want to be part of the squelching of eagerness of the little ones coming in process.
I wanted to move toward my own eagerness about my own path and.
But think about it. Think about why that felt so off to you. In other words, what was it about not wanting to supervise children that felt
Well, they all just sit in their chairs and behave, and I had to make them. That's very challenging.
Don't you? But do you think that your discomfort was because you failed because their eagerness was bigger than you were?
Oh, I didn't fail. It was just an impossible task.
But you failed at the prescribed task because
Yes.
the eagerness of those coming in.
Well, I lost the desire to do it.
So why did you lose the desire to do it? Because you couldn't buck their current. In other words,
Right, I couldn't buck their current.
Their eagerness,
well, I couldn't buck my own current.
But their eagerness won.
Their eagerness won, and it was beating me up inside. So.
But wait, it wasn't their eagerness that was beating you up.
No.
It was the wrong-headedness of anyone wanting to squelch the eagerness of children.
Yes, so I moved away from that.
Don't
so
you find this an interesting conversation? You're the only one who's not really hearing it. We know you get the general irony in it, but there's much more here for you to feel about this, because you inspirationally, you set up this conversation with us in this perfect fashion. The words that flowed through you were the perfect words to explain that you are a source energy being who resents the loss of your own eagerness. And for 45 years, you've been contemplating it. And so then you attracted an occupation where you were actually part of the very problem that you've been pushing against for a very long time.
Makes sense.
We think it is a wonderful thing that your desire to feel eager and your desire to feel good was so in place with you that no one could make you stay in the chair either.
I was willing to give up the paycheck.
No one could keep you in that chair. And so you haven't lost your quest for eagerness, just like those kids that don't want to behave in those classrooms have not lost their eagerness. Your eagerness is still alive and well.
It is.
Otherwise, you would have given in like so many others and just ignored the emotion within you and accepted it as just a fact of life. But you're still frisky enough that you're not willing to do that. Hear that. This is really an important acknowledgement. My eagerness matters as much to me in all of these years later as it does to those fresh kids. And they were there to remind me of the eagerness quest that I am on. This is a really good thing, a really good acknowledgement, you see. And while it feels like I've paid a big price of unemployment and I've paid a big price of giving up income in order to have eagerness, we say vortex first and everything else later. Vortex first and everything else later. Now that isn't to say that you couldn't remain in an environment where there are rules and things that people are requiring of you that you couldn't get around by doing the vortex work first. In other words, we know that everything shifts, but it's not an easy thing to be a responder to what's happening in your life and then try to get your emotional world in order. It's a lot easier if you keep your emotional world in order. In other words, what you want to say, what we want to say to those kids is keep it up and keep making staying in those chairs an impossible task for the teachers. Keep it up. Never lose your quest for enthusiasm for life. Never lose your thirst to feel good. Never allow anyone to suppress you. Always stay in that high-flying place, because the fact of it is the source within them is present, and that's why they're having those energetic moments. So what happens to you as you begin to interact with children, there is nothing more alerting or alarming or to give you the information that you're looking for than to spend time with children, because they represent still everything that you desire to be, which is tuned in, tapped in, turned on, which is, for the most part, not worried about what other people are thinking, which is still selfishly oriented, which means still pointing themselves toward whatever thought and action and word that it takes to stay in alignment with who they really are. And so, as is often the case in those settings, the student is the real teacher. So now what? So now where does that leave you now?
I thought maybe you could tell me that.
Well, what do you think your quest is? In other words, it's sort of obvious as a result of the conversation we've just had, but you started out with the perfect words. You want to restore your eagerness for life.
Yes.
Which means you want to restore your relationship with the vortex. And have we convinced you, even in the words that we offered before you sat down here, that that's something that you can accomplish, because the emotional journey is not a time-consuming journey. It takes understanding it, and it takes being willing to direct the thought. But if these things are in place for you, if you accept that you are a vibrational being, and you accept that any lack of eagerness is because you've pinched it off with thought, and then you accept that you can put your thought wherever you need to put it in order for the eagerness to return, doesn't it sound like something that we could do, like even like right now? In other words, you can't get a new paycheck right now, necessarily, although there may be someone in the room with one in their pocket they'd like to give you, but it's unlikely. But, in fact, it's not going to happen. But you can restore your alignment. You can get the eagerness back, which is the whole point that you wanted to talk about when you sat down here. Clearly, from everything that came out of your mouth was pointed there, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, talk to us about anything that you think is in the way of your eagerness. Just mention it. We'll cut you off if it gets too long-winded.
Well, lack of money.
Lack of money squelches your eagerness. So
it does.
So what do you mean? Give us more. Get more specific.
I'm afraid I'm going to run out, and I'm going to have to ask somebody for some.
So, and take that further. And what would that mean?
Then I'm not pulling my own weight. Then I'm not contributing. I'm not being a grown-up.
And by whose point of view? In other words, if you had to ask somebody specifically for money, you've already formulated what you think their opinion of that would be, and now you're poking around in that opinion and making yourself pretty uncomfortable.
I am poking around in that opinion way too much.
And that's really specific, isn't it? And the more specific
I'm beating the drum of that quite a bit.
And the more specific you are in opposition to what you want. Now, you think you're talking about money, but we think you're talking about eagerness. In other words, what is worse than having someone disapprove of you?
Nothing's worse than that.
Yes, something's worse. Losing your eagerness.
That's worse.
But you're losing your eagerness because you're worried about what somebody thinks of you.
They're all in my head. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting, though? So can you separate your eagerness from their approval or disapproval? It's not the easiest thing to do, but do you think that conceptually it can be done? Would it be possible for you to so not give a rip what anybody thinks that you remain eager? The kids in the classroom do it. You were a failure. You could not suck the eagerness from them, you see. So do you think that you could stand in a place of such eager defiance? Eagerness is defiance against bondage. Defiance against opinion of people who want to squelch you by their disapproval, by their willingness to label you a failure, because we're getting carried away here, yes. But we're getting it all right out of your vibration. In other words, that's right. What's there.
It's not really other people. It's what I think they're going to say. It's really, it's within me.
They're not even saying it.
They're not even saying it. Yeah.
You're creating the whole story.
I'm creating it all, yeah. I'm playing the same record over and over again.
It's that perceptual thing. So now we've gotten really specific. Wasn't it fun? Ooh, meaty. We could make a movie out of this. But
is there a paycheck?
But eventually... So we got specific, didn't we? And in the specifics of it, it got feeling worse and worse and worse and worse, even though we're playing about it. But you get the point of it. So now let's get general about it. Generally negative. People don't know what they're talking about. People don't know what they're talking about relative to me. People don't know what makes me tick. People don't get to decide for me who I am and what I want to do. In other words, it's negative, but it's less specifically negative, and it actually feels better to be negative.
It's anger versus depressed. It's movement.
You're right. You're right. You are sort of moving up the emotional scale.
Yeah.
But we're augmenting that moving up the emotional scale by making it simpler. The emotional scale had infinite set points on it that you are reaching for. This is a easier to understand scale because it has basically only 4 columns. There is specifically negative, there is generally positive, and then specifically positive. And what happens so often is that you beat up on yourself because you want to jump from specifically negative to specifically positive, and it's too big of a jump.
It's too big a jump.
So we just want you to get generally negative until you feel some of your eagerness returning in the form of revenge. Now, that's funny, isn't it? But don't you feel more eager in revenge than you do in depression? Of course
Absolutely.
You do. In other words, and so that's why we were saying they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know who I am. They don't know how much I want to feel good. They don't know what I'm capable of accomplishing. They don't get to decide. Nobody gets to take a snapshot of where I am and proclaim that that's who I am. I'm here on a journey. I came to experience life. I came to evolve and expand. I came to choose what I want. So now we're getting a little more positive.
Yeah.
But we want to move to the specifically positive about this subject, because you're close enough that you'll feel it as we begin to unravel it. And we want you to stay there long enough that you find the eagerness that you were born with and the eagerness that you've been searching for.